Now, I would not consider myself to be a singer in any way, shape, or form, but recently I've been having a lot of fun adding my own vocals to tracks as part of the Weekly Beats Challenge, and through that process, I've come up with a really cool way to really simply add easy and quick vocal chops to a track without having to chop up an existing a cappella. And in this video, I want to show you exactly how I've been doing it. Quick disclaimer, you absolutely do not need to be a singer for this because we're going to be tuning our voice using audio effects. But speaking of, you will need access to some kind of tuning plugin, whether that's like an Autotune, like M Auto Pitch, or an Autotune actual Antares plugin, and preferably something like Melodyne as well, although you can get by without it. And yes, whilst you can do this technique without any pitch correction software, if you're not a well-trained singer like me and can't really sing in tune that well, having pitch correction software is going to be a huge help for this. Okay, so for this video, I'm gonna recreate the vocal chops for one of my recent Weekly Beats tracks called Falling Away, and this is just a snippet of what the vocal chops sound like in that track. So I've gone ahead and muted the existing vocal chops from the backing, and the way in which I created these vocal chops is I actually came up with the vocal chop melody that I wanted to use first. And so what I've gone ahead and done here is put that melody in some kind of a grand piano sound, which sounds like this. It's really super simple, but this is what we're going to use as kind of like our vocal guide track to sing along to and then create our vocal chops from. And so now comes the kind of cheat part to making the vocal chops. We're gonna sing along to this melody that we've made, except using the sounds that we want for the vocal chops. So instead of having to chop up an existing a cappella or the vocals for the rest of the song, we've just got the sounds that we want to use already. So here I've gone ahead and set up a track here to record my vocals onto, and these are just going directly into my MacBook microphone, nothing fancy. And I'm just gonna record myself singing the vowel sounds or the sounds that I want along to this piano melody, along to the rest of the track. And also when you're doing this, feel free to experiment a little bit as well. Kind of go off the beaten path and maybe add some extra sounds here and there that you think might be useful when you're chopping it up, because as we're going to do, we can tune them later if they're a little bit out of tune. So let's go ahead and now record in our vocals to this track. Oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah, oh. So as you would have heard, there were some places where I kind of went a little bit off the melody that I'd written, and it didn't sound too fantastic in terms of being on pitch, but that's fine because we're gonna go ahead and tune all of these vocals now. And this is where something like Melodyne comes into it. So what I'm gonna do is add Melodyne to this track. And if you're using a different kind of digital audio workstation that has ARA support, you'll be able to just work with Melodyne directly on the audio clip. However, here in Ableton Live, I'll need to transfer the audio into Melodyne by clicking on the transfer button and then just playing back the audio that I recorded. So I've gone ahead and transferred the vocals into Melodyne, and this is what they sound like. Oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah. Not that fantastic, but now we're just going to highly tune all of these vocals, and all we need to do is just select all of the vocals here. I'm gonna go up to Edit, Macros, Correct Pitch, and just drag the pitch center all the way up and the pitch drift all the way up as well. And if we've set our chord scale, which I have here to be B major, I'm gonna select Snap to Chord Scale. And now I'm just gonna press OK and take a listen to the result. Oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah. And if there are any notes that aren't quite in tune, we can just zoom in and maybe tune this one up to the B where it's supposed to be. Oh, 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 eh, ah, oh. Now, if you just have the lower version of Melodyne, you won't be able to do this next step, but that's okay because we're going to be adding Autotune and stuff later on anyway. But I also like to go ahead and just zoom out, select all of the notes with Command and A, and now I'm going to switch to the vibrato tool or pitch modulation tool and just click and drag everything down so that we flatten out each of the notes. Oh, 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 eh, ah, oh. Let's close out Melodyne and let's go ahead and add an auto-tune effect onto this vocal now so we can get that really tuned sound. Again, you can go ahead and use any auto-tune plugin you want. I'm gonna go ahead and use the free M Auto Pitch by Melda Audio and just drag this after the Melodyne. I'm gonna go ahead and set the scale to B major,
because that's what we're working with. And I'm going to set the depth all the way to 100%, and we can adjust the speed to taste.
Oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah, oh.
And of course, if there are any notes you want to retune, you can always go back into Melodyne and just tune those notes as you desire. But for this, I'm not going to worry about it too much. Now, if you don't have access to something like Melodyne or very similar, you can kind of do the same thing in Ableton Live, except you just need to split each of the different notes that you would like to tune and then adjust their tuning manually with the pitch control inside of the clip in either sense or in semitones. That's why having something like Melodyne for this is a much simpler process, because you don't have to go through and tune every single note manually like that. You can just let the program do it for you. And now that we've tuned the vocal, I'm gonna go ahead and add some processing so it sounds a little bit nicer and crisper. First, we're gonna start with some EQ. I'm gonna use EQ8 here, and I'm gonna pull out all of the low frequencies, and we're gonna adjust some of the mid frequencies here to pull down this boominess, and maybe we can boost some of these high frequencies a little bit as well.
Oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah, oh.
Next, what I'm going to go ahead and do is add two compressors. The first compressor, I'm just going to use a limiter for this, because I want to use this compressor to just reduce the level of some of the peaky bits of the audio. And to do this, I'm just going to pull down the ceiling.
Oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 ah, oh.
Next, what I want to do is add some more gentle compression. So I'm going to go ahead and use Ableton Live's basic stock compressor here. Make sure it's set to RMS mode, pull down the threshold, and have a little bit of a slower attack and a slower release, as well as a bit of a higher knee value here, so that we just get some more gentle compression, and dial in the threshold and ratio to taste.
Oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 ah, oh.
Next, I'm going to add some more EQ just to shape the tone of the sound a little bit.
Oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 ah, oh, 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 ah, oh.
And finally, some saturation with Ableton Live Saturator.
Oh, 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 eh, ah, oh, 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 ah.
And then a little bit more limiting with Ableton Live's limiter.
Oh, 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 ah, oh, 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 ah.
Now, of course, this is some very, very heavy processing, and you don't have to go this heavy, but for the style of music that I'm working in, it kind of works, so that's why I've got all this processing on. Next, what I'm going to go ahead and do is freeze and flatten these vocals. Now, I could do this in a few different ways, but I'm just going to go ahead and right-click on the track here, and just click on Freeze and Flatten Track. And this is a new feature in Ableton Live 12. If you don't have Live 12, you can just freeze the track and then flatten it manually. And now we've rendered out that track and all its processing to an audio file that we can now work with to create our vocal chops. So next, let's go ahead and create a MIDI track. Let's delete this channel strip and go ahead and click and drag this audio clip that we've created with the vocals onto this new MIDI track. And that will load it up as a simpler instrument. Next, I'm just going to go to slice mode, and now I can play back these different slices of this audio clip using my computer MIDI keyboard or just using MIDI in general. So let's go ahead and turn on the computer MIDI keyboard with the M key, solo our new track here. Let's go ahead and reduce the sensitivity of the slicing here, zoom in a little bit, and now we can see all of these different notes that we have got to play with. Just so that we get a little bit more control over the length of each of these different slices, I'm going to switch the simpler here to gate mode, which is going to stop any sample from playing as soon as I release the key that it's playing. Which is really useful for vocal chops using this method. Next, let's go ahead and create an 8-bar long MIDI clip to match the length of the vocal phrase that we want by selecting the area, right-clicking and selecting Insert an Empty MIDI clip. And now all I'm going to do is try and recreate that initial grand piano melody and that melody that I was singing by finding the chops in this particular MIDI clip that are associated with those notes. To make this a little bit easier, I'm just going to select all of the notes in our existing piano MIDI clip that we had and used as a guide, and I'm just going to copy those over to this new MIDI clip so that we have the rhythm, and now all we need to do is find the chops that are associated with that rhythm. By the way, if you're enjoying this video so far, I'd love to invite you to leave a like down below and subscribe if you're new, and if you'd like to learn more about the very fundamentals of how to create your own music using Ableton Live, I have an online course that takes you through everything you need to know in order to be able to create your own original music using the software. I'll leave a link for that down below. So I've gone ahead and found those chops. Now let's go ahead and adjust the rhythms here just a little bit so that we can extend out some of these notes. And let's go back to the simpler and just add a little bit of a fade out so there's not as much of a choppy sound at the end of each of these notes. And the cool thing about this method is that we can also go ahead and just adjust some of these chops if we don't like the ones that we've got. And this is going to be really easy because we know that pretty much everything we've sung is going to be the note or the sound that we want. And we can also go ahead and add in new or different slices that we weren't kind of expecting or trying to add initially by just finding ones that we like and adding them maybe in some of the gaps. So for instance, I might want to add some kind of a double eighth note here. And maybe add a bit of a turnaround note here. Now that we've got our vocal chops here in the simpler, you could just go ahead and process them on the track and leave it as is, but I like to take it a little bit of a step further and go ahead and actually freeze and flatten this track with the vocal chops so that I can work with them in audio. So to do this, I'm just again going to right click on the track and go freeze and flatten. And why I like being able to do this is now I can go into the audio clip and pitch it up by say 12 semitones for a whole octave, change the warp mode to something like Complex Pro. And in Live 12, I get the ability to actually modulate this formants and envelope control. Which can sound really cool on this kind of a sound. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to go here to the envelopes tab and just modulate this formants control so that it kind of just moves smoothly over the course of this 8 bars. Maybe starts going down here, goes back up, and back down. Something along these lines. Let's go ahead and duplicate this pattern so that it lasts for the entirety of our 16-bar loop. And now we can add some further processing to these vocal chops just to make them sound a little bit more present and inviting in this track. First up, let's add an OTT, pull down the amount a little bit, and just pull out all of the low frequencies. Next, let's go ahead and add an EQ. Now let's add some delay and some reverb. So let's start with some delay. Maybe set it to ping pong, pull down the dry, wet, and the feedback, and adjust the filter. Let's go ahead and add some reverb. And finally, let's add some limiting just to bring it all together a little bit more. And again, I'm just going to increase the gain into this limiter. Let's pull down the level of this a little bit and have a listen to how it sounds in the rest of the track. Obviously sounds a little bit different from the original vocal chops, but that is the process that I went through to create the vocal chops for that track, and the process that I've been using for vocal chops for a few of my recent Weekly Beats tracks, and I've been having a huge amount of fun doing it. I think it's super interesting, unique, fun, and actually quite easy once you get the hang of it. And it's something that if you feel up to it, I would absolutely encourage you to try out in your own music as well. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you all in the next video.